Welcome to CBS Sports HQ, presented by Capital One. Amanda Garrett, Chris Hassel with you here on your Thursday. It is almost the weekend. We've got week 0 action coming up in college football. However, we begin in the world of basketball, where the Oklahoma City Thunder, a rough start to the season before it even begins.
Yeah, we heard yesterday rumblings of a Chet Holmgren injury. We tried not to fear the worst, and it might not be worst case scenario, but it is not good. Chet Holmgren is going to miss the entire upcoming season for the Oklahoma City Thunder. He has a Liz Frank injury in his right foot, suffered it here playing in a Pro-Am event over the weekend with the likes of LeBron James and others. He was selected 2nd overall in this summer's draft, and for a long time, the projected #1 pick. Long, lanky, very slender frame, and he's going to miss all of this upcoming season, so he won't be a rookie until the 23-24 season. This is how Sportsline has adjusted things. They've knocked about 3.5 wins off OKC's projected total from over 21 down to 17.5. They already had a less than 1% chance of making the playoffs, so that didn't change at all. But certainly the excitement level goes way down when you don't have the #2 overall pick this upcoming season. Let's get Avery Johnson and Bill Reiter in here to talk about Chet Holmgren's injury. Avery, what kind of blow is this for someone who was already kind of being picked apart by some NBA scouts who said that, the frame just isn't big enough, and now he's not even going to be able to play for another year?
Well, it's a blow to Chet Holmgren in the Oklahoma City Thunder, because you want to see him on the court. He played some solid basketball, not just at Gonzaga, but in the NBA Summer League in Las Vegas. He showed some signs of how versatile he is as a 5-man with that type of frame. Sure, he doesn't have the bulkiest size, but he showed he can shoot the basketball, he can handle the ball, he can block shots, he can run the floor. He's not afraid to mix it up. That was a positive. I don't think this is a complete negative. If you remember, Joel Embiid started his NBA career off with basically 2 consecutive years of being injured. So I think this will give Chet Holmgren a chance to really work on his body, work on his, frame, to try to, start to not necessarily fill out, but just get stronger. This team wasn't going anywhere anyway. I predicted him to win about 18 games next year, maybe 20 at the most. So I don't think this is a significant setback in terms of where they're trying to rise to in the next 3 to 5 years, not just next year.
Yeah, I'm with Avery. I think the main takeaway here is that the jury will now remain out on whether or not the Thunder made the right decision to draft Holmgren at #2, because the questions about him, the talent's obvious. We saw it in Summer League. The guy is a marvelously talented basketball player. The questions about his long-term durability obviously can't be answered this year, and Coach is right. Embiid missed time. Blake Griffin was hurt his first year. I mean, there's a history of guys who have early injuries, and that defines their careers. But there's also a history of guys in the NBA who have early injuries and miss a lot of time their rookie season or early in their career and are just fine. So I think for the Thunder, who, as Coach just pointed out, are on a long-term rebuilding plan. I mean, it really is a long-term situation where they have lost on purpose for a while. They're not going to win a lot of games this year. The question of Holmgren, as much as this is such a bummer for that young man personally, that he can't hoop it up for the next year, what he's about, what he's going to be in the NBA, what it means for the Thunder, it simply, I think, guys, delays our ability to answer that question for another year.
Bill, how does it compare to what we saw from the 76ers 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago when for 4 straight seasons they were bottom 2 in the East? The last 2 seasons the Thunder have been bottom 2 in the West, and they're accumulating all these future draft picks.
So it's a great question, and I think it's the perfect example, and it depends how you want to really define whether or not what the Sixers went through, the tankathons that they did year after year, has worked out. Because on the one hand, they did get Joel Embiid. He fell to them, if I remember right, at 3 in the draft because of concerns about his health. He missed time, and now he is what, guys? A top 2, a top 3, a top 4 player in the NBA year after year. But they haven't won an NBA championship. They haven't made an NBA Finals. I think they're going to be interesting this year. So it's hard to know even how you assess whether it worked for the Sixers, because I think the jury's still out on them. It's the same approach. It's the same process. And for it to be as successful as it has been with Philly, and at least for me, for it to be worth several seasons where your fans have to accept losing night after night after night, I think Holmgren's got to be healthy. They've got to be able to develop the guys they have, and they have to draft really successfully in the years that are going forward. So we're in the midst of another, you're right, Sixers-like strategy to be bad, to be good in the long term. And I think this injury, while not a death blow, is a reminder when you do that, you are putting a lot of fate and a lot of luck on the table in terms of how your future is impacted.
You guys remember in 1997, we won't call it tanking, but if we remember, the Boston Celtics were trying to position themselves to draft Tim Duncan, and had the first pick in the draft that year, and had the most opportunities to get the first pick in the draft, but unfortunately didn't work, and San Antonio landed with the first pick and drafted Tim Duncan, and the rest is history. Same thing with this situation. With all of the changes with the lottery system, you can still try to end up with the worst record, but as you know, that doesn't guarantee you that you're going to get the first pick to get this guy that's unbelievable that's coming out next year. So I think this is a situation that the Thunder really doesn't have any other choices. They're going to win 20 or less games, try to continue to develop some of the other guys on the team. They committed to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with a long-term contract. They got some other young guys. They drafted 2 guys named Jalen Williams, so we'll see which Jalen turns out to be the best. But this is a long overhaul of a roster to see if they can position themselves to get this 7'5" freak of nature that's playing in Europe right now.
Yeah, Avery is talking about the young man from France, Victor Wembanyama. I believe that is how it's pronounced. I'm not 100%. We'll know for sure in the next month or so when everybody starts saying his name on a daily basis. But does this help at all in their hope that they could get the number 1 overall pick when you consider the way the NBA does that lottery system now?
I think only more. No, I mean, I think whatever help is fractional because of what Avery just walked us through. And there are a lot of teams that are going to be bad this year, guys, that are going to win, mid or low 20 games if things go badly, including the Rockets, including the Spurs, probably including the Orlando Magic. I don't think the Pistons are going to win a lot of games. So it's not as if there's a bunch of really good teams all clustered together, and then there's the Thunder, and they're competing with a couple teams. The way that they've restructured the math on the lottery picks to try to do away a little bit with tanking, and the fact there are still a lot of bad basketball teams that are not going to win a lot of games this year, means that there's a good chance. I mean, I think it's certainly 50% or more that the Thunder are not going to have that pick. Does it increase the odds? Ever so marginally, but I think if you got Sam Presti, the GM in Oklahoma City, and an honest answer from him, I think he'd rather have Holmgren playing and developing, because the Thunder team was going to be bad even with that young man playing, and they would have had similar odds to landing that number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, when you're looking at Oklahoma, and Sam Presti, as my buddy Bill alluded to, what a better GM to go through this situation. He's been here before. This is the same guy that you drafted Kevin Durant and James Harden, Westbrook. So, he knows what he's doing, especially if the Oklahoma City Thunder faithful just remain patient. So I just think they're well positioned, but this is going to be a significantly long rebuild. Because again, there's no real aircraft carriers that's walking through the door that can replace Chet Holmgren. And we don't even really know what he can do yet on the NBA level. They have a lot of assets, those draft picks and the young players. And maybe at some point in the next year or two, maybe you do what Danny Ainge did with the Boston Celtics and trade away a lot of your young assets, and you bring on 2 veteran players like they did with Garnett and Ray Allen to, go along with a Paul Pierce. But this Victor W, as I'm calling him, my plays will work a whole lot better with Victor W on my team. This guy is amazing. I've talked to some other executives from other NBA teams. They said if you could tank for that 1 spot and guarantee yourself that you can get it, there'll be a lot of other teams like the Indiana Pacers and the Washington Wizards that would love to get in play for this young man. I've watched a little film on him. Wow, he's very, very talented, long, can run the floor, great hand-eye coordination. He can shoot it, he can handle the ball. this could be a game changer for any franchise.
Thunder definitely going to be in the running for Victor W. But as Bill pointed out, the way the lottery is done now, even if the Thunder win 5 games next season, the chances are better than not that they will not get the number 1 overall pick because of how they weight things. I want to go back to how this happened, which was in a Pro-Am event over the weekend. We've been seeing a lot more of this from current players in the NBA playing with other current players, some former players, and even some average Joes. Bill, in a second, I want your take on what you're hearing around the league about what teams and how teams feel about this. But Avery, as a former player and a former coach, how do you feel about it?
Well, in terms of playing in summer leagues, I played in summer leagues all across the country during my prime of my career. You know, one of the reasons I moved to Houston, Texas, because there was a gym called Findy Recreation Center where we played our summer league games. And each summer league team that consisted of 10 players, you know, 7 or 8 were pros, guys that were currently in the NBA. And that was some of the best run and ways to stay in shape in the off season. And then we would transition to Los Angeles, and then we would play in Vegas, and then we would play in New York. So again, play a little bit in Dallas. So we played all over the country. Now, we didn't play when the conditions weren't healthy. If the court was too slippery or if the gym was 120 degrees, no, we weren't going to play. If we played with, you know, maybe some guys that were just seriously trying to injure players to prove non-NBA players that were just trying to prove that they should play in the NBA, we weren't going to play. But this was a way to stay in shape because we love the game of basketball. Obviously, I don't know the exact conditions just from what we've been told of why they canceled the games in Seattle. But in terms of staying in shape, this was a major part of our conditioning in the off season, playing in summer league games to go along with the strength training, fundamental training, swimming in the pool, lifting weights. This was a major part of it, but not when you're in conditions that are unsafe.
Yeah, and I can certainly just give the perspective from folks in front offices around the league who do keep a weary eye on these situations, but understand, as Coach just said, guys are going to hoop. And if you talk to any GM, any person who evaluates talent for a living, from the lowest scout all the way to the top of an organization, they want people, they really do, who love basketball, who love to be in the gym, who love the game. And guys who love the game that play professional basketball are going to play basketball year-round. That is a given. It's the conditions, as Avery talked about, that are critical. And if the reports out there are true, that the reason that particular game had to be canceled in the second quarter is because there was moisture on the floor and the conditions weren't appropriate, I think it just reinforces for people around the NBA that guys are going to play, but they've got to be really particular. As Avery just walked us through, all the scenarios where maybe you just have to say to yourself, this isn't the right spot. Now, to be fair to Chet Holmgren, and I think the difficult situation for the Thunder, if you're a young guy trying to prove himself in the NBA and LeBron James, among others, wants you to be part of hooping together in the offseason, you're not going to say no. So there might be some conversations, guys, from front offices, as I understand it, to people around the league. The obvious stuff to guys, have a good summer, have a good offseason, do your thing. Let's just remember the Holmgren thing and be careful. Let's just make sure when you're doing your thing, you're doing it in places and with people where the situation's optimal so you don't get hurt.
And the last thing I want to say is, you know, guys that love to play in these summer league games, and you're playing and you're traveling from LA, Las Vegas, Seattle, playing in these games, can we please reduce some of this load management stuff in the regular season? If you can play in all these games and you're traveling around, let's start playing in more NBA games instead of, you know, load management for 15 games. You know, I played in 82 games for 4 years in a row or more, and I wasn't feeling good every night. Let's play in the games. Fans pay money to see you play and not to load manage.
Avery Johnson, load management is a load of blank, right? Avery Johnson and Bill Reiter with us here on CBS Sports HQ. Chet Holmgren out for the season with a Liz Frank injury. We look at the upcoming dates in the NBA. Hall of Fame weekend is in a couple of weeks. Training camps will open in about a month. The regular season is just a little more than a month away, 8 weeks or thereabouts.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.